For 40 nights, something watched me sleep. I didn't know it at first. How could I? We spend a third of our lives unconscious, vulnerable, completely unaware of what happens around us in those dark hours. But what I discovered about sleep, about consciousness, about what we really are when our minds shut down, will change everything you think you know about rest, dreams, and the nature of reality itself. I need to warn you right now. This information comes with a price. It will answer questions you've had your whole life about why you wake up exhausted, why certain dreams feel more real than reality, why you sometimes know things you couldn't possibly know. But it will also create new questions, deeper ones, about the 8 hours you surrender every single night without questioning what really happens during that time. If you're ready to discover what truly occurs when you close your eyes, when your conscious mind releases its grip, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Because what happened to me over those 40 nights, what the being showed me about sleep and consciousness, is something humanity was never supposed to understand. But now you will. Let me tell you how it began. My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 43 years old, a data analyst living alone in Seattle, and until 3 months ago, I thought I understood sleep. You get tired, you lie down, you close your eyes, you wake up. Simple. Biological necessity. Nothing mysterious about it. I was wrong about everything. It started subtly, the way these things always do. Small disturbances that you dismiss because acknowledging them means admitting something is wrong. Something is different. I began waking at exactly 3:33 a.m. Not 3:30, not 3:35. Exactly 3:33. Every single night for a week straight. I'd bolt awake, heart racing, with the overwhelming sensation that someone had just been standing over my bed. But my apartment was always empty, door locked, windows secured. Nothing out of place. Stress, I told myself. Work deadline. Too much caffeine. We're very good at lying to ourselves when the truth is uncomfortable. By the second week, the sensation changed. I wasn't waking up because of a noise or a dream. I was waking up because I felt something. A presence. Not threatening exactly, but intensely focused. Like being studied under a microscope. I started leaving lights on. I installed a security camera pointed at my bed. I even considered sleeping with the TV on. Anything to break the oppressive silence that seemed to press down on me during those dark hours. The camera showed nothing. Just me, sleeping restlessly, occasionally tossing and turning. But I knew, with a certainty I couldn't explain, that something was there. Something the camera couldn't capture. Then came the exhaustion. Despite sleeping 8 hours every night, I woke up feeling like I'd run a marathon. Not just tired, but depleted. Drained at a level deeper than physical fatigue. My mind felt foggy. My body moved like it was encased in concrete. Coffee did nothing. Energy drinks were useless. My doctor ran tests. Blood work came back normal. Sleep study showed standard REM cycles. No apnea, no abnormalities. Sometimes stress manifests physically, she said, prescribing vitamin supplements and suggesting meditation. But I knew it wasn't stress. This was something else. I started researching sleep disorders online. Sleep paralysis, night terrors, hypnagogic hallucinations. Nothing fit exactly. The articles all described fear, panic, terror. But what I felt wasn't fear. It was awareness. The bone-deep knowledge that during those 8 hours when my conscious mind shut down, something was happening that I couldn't remember. My productivity at work collapsed. I made mistakes in reports, missed meetings, couldn't focus during presentations. My boss pulled me aside with concern. "Daniel, what's going on? This isn't like you." "I'm not sleeping well," I said, which was both true and completely inadequate. "Take a few days off," he suggested. "Get some rest." Rest. The one thing I couldn't seem to get no matter how many hours I spent in bed. 3 weeks into this nightmare, I made a decision that changed everything. I would stay awake. Completely awake. No sleep. I'd push through an entire night, fully conscious, and prove to myself that nothing was there. That this was all in my head. I loaded up on coffee. I set alarms every 30 minutes. I kept every light blazing. I positioned myself in my living room with a clear view of the bedroom doorway. At 11 p.m., I was alert, caffeinated, determined. By 1 a.m., my eyes were heavy, but I forced them open. At 2 a.m., I stood up and paced, doing jumping jacks to keep my blood flowing. At 3 a.m., I felt it building. That sensation of presence, growing stronger, pressing in from all sides. And at 3:33 a.m. exactly, something happened that should have been impossible. I blinked. Just once. A single, involuntary blink. And in that fraction of a second when my eyelids closed, I saw it. Not with my eyes. With something else. Some other mode of perception that only activated when my visual cortex briefly shut down. There was something in my bedroom. Something tall and impossibly thin, standing at the foot of my bed even though my bed was empty and I was sitting in the living room 20 feet away. I gasped, my eyes flying open, and it was gone. But the afterimage burned in my mind. Not like a dream or hallucination. Like a photograph briefly exposed to light. My heart hammered. My hands shook so violently I spilled coffee down my shirt. Because in that split-second glimpse, I had understood something fundamental. It wasn't appearing when I was asleep. It was always there. I just couldn't see it when my eyes were open. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that night. Not because I was trying to stay awake, but because I physically couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it standing there. Watching. Waiting. On the 4th day, exhaustion finally won. I collapsed on my couch at 6 p.m. and fell into the deepest sleep of my life. And that's when everything changed. I found myself in a space that wasn't a dream. Dreams have that quality of fluid unreality, where logic bends and locations shift. This was different. Solid. Consistent. More real than reality in some fundamental way. I stood in what looked like my bedroom, but the walls were translucent, glowing with a soft bioluminescent light. And in the corner, finally fully visible, was the being that had been watching me. It was humanoid in the most generous sense. 9 feet tall, impossibly slender, with limbs that seemed to bend in more directions than human joints allowed. Its skin, if you could call it that, appeared to be made of condensed starlight, shifting between corporeal and incorporeal. But its eyes, enormous and multifaceted like an insect's, held an intelligence that was unmistakably conscious, aware, and ancient. I should have been terrified. But I wasn't. Because in this space, this between place, I could feel its intention as clearly as hearing words. And it wasn't hostile. It was curious. You can see me now, it said, though its mouth, a barely visible slit, didn't move. The communication happened directly in my mind, bypassing language entirely. Took longer than expected. Your species has built impressive barriers to perception. What are you? I managed to ask, my voice sounding strange even to myself in this non-space. Observer. Researcher. Your language lacks proper terminology. It tilted its head in an almost human gesture of consideration. I study consciousness at the transition point. The threshold between waking and sleeping. That's where truth exists. How long have you been watching me? 40 nights. Though time is flexible here. From your perspective, 40 nights. From mine, 40 moments of simultaneous observation across multiple probability streams. My mind struggled to process this. You've been in my bedroom every night for 40 nights. I've been in all bedrooms. I observe thousands of your species simultaneously. You're simply one data point that became anomalous. Anomalous how? The being moved closer, and I realized its method of locomotion wasn't walking but something like flowing through space. You started to wake up. Not physically, your body remained in sleep state. But your consciousness started pushing against the boundaries, refusing to fully disengage. Highly unusual for your species. I don't understand. Of course not. You don't understand what sleep actually is. What you call rest is really something far more complex. And what you've been experiencing, this exhaustion, this drain, is a side effect of resistance. You're fighting a process you don't comprehend. Then explain it to me. The being's multifaceted eyes seemed to sparkle with something that might have been amusement. That's why I allowed you to perceive me. You're ready for knowledge your species has forgotten. Or perhaps never fully possessed. The environment around us shifted. We were no longer in my bedroom but floating in what looked like infinite darkness punctuated by billions of points of light. Not stars. These lights pulsed and flowed like living things. This is the substrate, the being explained. The fundamental layer beneath what you perceive as physical reality. Your scientists call it quantum foam, zero-point field, other inadequate names. But it's essentially consciousness itself. The raw material from which everything emerges. As I watched, some of the lights began clustering together, forming larger, more complex patterns. The being gestured toward them. Individual consciousness, what you experience as you, is like a wave in an ocean. It appears separate, distinct, but it's always part of the whole. During waking hours, you experience the illusion of separation. Your senses, your ego, your identity create boundaries that feel absolute. And during sleep, those boundaries dissolve. The wave returns to the ocean. Your consciousness expands, merges with the substrate, accesses information and experiences beyond your individual lifetime. This is necessary. This is how consciousness refreshes itself, updates, processes, integrates. I watched as a particularly bright cluster of light suddenly expanded, its edges blurring and merging with surrounding lights before contracting again into a distinct point. That's what happens when you sleep. I asked. Every night. For every conscious being in existence. Sleep isn't rest in the sense you understand it. It's reconnect remembrance. A return to source. But then why do we feel rested when we wake up? The being made a sound that might have been equivalent to a human chuckle. Do you? Or do you feel reset? There's a difference. You don't wake up with more energy. You wake up with a cleared processing buffer. Your short-term memory consolidated, your emotional residue processed, your neural pathways optimized. But the energy itself, the vital force, that came from reconnecting to the substrate. My mind reeled. So sleep is about reconnecting to some kind of universal consciousness. Not some kind of. The only consciousness. Individual awareness is temporary, local, limited. But during sleep, you access unlimited awareness. The challenge is that your waking mind, your ego structure, resists this. It fears dissolution. It interprets the boundary collapse as death. Is that what causes nightmares? Sometimes, nightmares serve multiple functions. Some process fear and trauma. Others are warning systems. But some nightmares are actually your ego fighting the expansion process. It creates terrifying scenarios to snap you back into limited awareness because unlimited awareness feels like annihilation to the constructed self. I gestured around us at the infinite space. And you observe all of this? Watch humans sleep. We observe thousands of species across multiple dimensions and reality layers. Sleep, or its equivalent, is universal. All consciousness requires periodic reconnect to source. But your species is particularly interesting right now. Why? Because you're in transition. Collectively awakening to broader awareness while simultaneously building technological systems that fragment consciousness further. Fascinating contradiction. Some of your species are beginning to access higher states of awareness during waking hours. Others are so dissociated they barely connect during sleep anymore. What happens to people who don't connect properly during sleep? The being's expression, if you could call it that, became grave. Deterioration. Your medical system sees the symptoms: depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, immune system failure. But these are effects, not causes. The cause is disconnection from source. When sleep is disrupted, either by external factors or internal resistance, consciousness begins to fragment. Is that what was happening to me? Why I felt so drained? Yes. You were fighting the expansion process. Your ego structure, particularly rigid due to your analytical mindset, was resisting the boundary dissolution. So you remained in a liminal state, neither fully connected nor fully separate. Exhausting for your system. How do I stop fighting it? By understanding what you really are. And that requires me to show you something your species has systematically hidden from itself for generations. The darkness around us suddenly filled with images. Not like watching a movie, more like being inside memories that weren't mine. I saw ancient humans sleeping in caves, their consciousness during sleep periods creating vast networks of shared dreaming. Communities solving problems together in the dream space, sharing knowledge, coordinating hunts and gathering through information accessed during sleep. Your ancestors understood sleep better, the being explained. They knew dreams were not random neural firing but access points to collective intelligence. Shamans, mystics, prophets, they were simply individuals who maintained conscious awareness during the transition. They could navigate both states deliberately. The images shifted. Medieval monks sleeping in specific patterns, timing their sleep cycles to maximize spiritual connection. Indigenous peoples using sacred plants to bridge waking and sleeping consciousness, accessing knowledge that seemed impossible. But then something changed, I said, watching the images accelerate through time. Industrial revolution. Electric lighting. Alarm clocks. Shift work. We started controlling sleep artificially. Yes, your species decided that sleep was inefficient. Wasted time. 8 hours of productivity lost. So you began to fight against natural rhythms. Artificial light disrupting circadian cycles. Stimulants to stay awake longer. Sedatives to force sleep when the body didn't want it. And slowly, over generations, you forgot what sleep was actually for. The images now showed modern humans in bed, surrounded by screens emitting blue light, their consciousness barely touching the substrate during sleep. Fragmented, shallow, disrupted. Look at their connection patterns, the being said, and suddenly I could see energy flows, thin threads connecting sleeping humans to the glowing substrate. In the ancient humans, these threads were thick, vibrant, pulsing with information exchange. In modern humans, they were threadbare, flickering, barely there. We're disconnecting, I whispered. Your species is experiencing an epidemic of disconnection. You call it insomnia, sleep disorders, chronic fatigue. But the root cause is that you've forgotten how to properly surrender to the sleep state. You lie in bed with your mind still engaged, still processing, still resisting the boundary dissolution that would allow true rest. The images faded, and we were back in that strange translucent version of my bedroom. The being moved closer, its presence somehow both alien and oddly comforting. Now let me show you specifically what's been happening with you. It gestured, and suddenly I was looking at myself, sleeping in my bed. But I was also somehow still standing beside the being, observing. Dual awareness. I watched my sleeping body, and around it I could see an energy field, aura-like but more complex, constantly shifting and pulsing. Every night when you fall asleep, this happens, the being said. My consciousness, visible as a bright point of light in my chest, began to expand. But as it started to blur at the edges, preparing to merge with the larger field, something happened. It snapped back, contracted, pulled inward. Your fear, the being explained. Your ego structure interprets the expansion as danger. So it pulls you back, keeps you trapped in limited awareness even during sleep. You never fully connect. You remain in the threshold, the liminal space, unable to access the substrate's restorative properties. I watched this happen repeatedly in accelerated time. Every night for 40 nights, my consciousness attempting to expand, my fear snapping it back. No wonder I was exhausted. Can you show me what it should look like? The scene changed. Now I saw someone else sleeping, a person whose consciousness expanded smoothly, effortlessly, merging with vast flows of light and information. Their physical body barely moved, in deep restorative rest, while their consciousness traveled through infinite space. This person wakes refreshed, the being said. Not because they were unconscious for 8 hours, but because they spent 8 hours reconnected to source. Downloading updates. Processing information at quantum level. accessing knowledge from the collective field. How do I learn to do that? By releasing the illusion of separation. By understanding that the dissolution you fear during sleep isn't death, it's expansion. Your true nature is not this limited, individual awareness. That's just a temporary focal point. Your true nature is the substrate itself, consciousness experiencing reality through billions of individual perspectives. I felt something shift in my understanding, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. So when I sleep, I'm not losing consciousness. I'm expanding consciousness. Exactly. But your species uses language that reinforces the illusion. You say I fell asleep as if consciousness is falling away. Better would be I expanded into sleep or I returned to source. Language shapes perception. Perception shapes experience. What about dreams? I asked. Where do they fit into all this? The being's multifaceted eyes seemed to brighten. Dreams are processing layers. Interfaces between individual awareness and collective field. They serve multiple purposes simultaneously. The space around us suddenly filled with swirling images, fragments of dreams, mine and others, mixing and flowing like water. Some dreams are memory consolidation. Your brain processing daily experiences, deciding what to keep in long-term storage. These dreams feel personal, specific, often repetitive. I saw flashes of mundane dreams, endless variations of being late to work, losing my keys, showing up naked to meetings. Other dreams are emotional processing. Your psyche working through unresolved feelings, past traumas, current anxieties. These often have symbolic content because the subconscious communicates in imagery, not language. Now I saw more intense dream fragments, being chased, falling, confronting people from my past. But some dreams, the being continued, and the quality of the images changed, becoming sharper, more vivid, are actual experiences. Your consciousness traveling through the substrate, accessing information, interacting with other dreaming minds, even receiving communication from beings like myself. Those dreams that feel more real than real, I said, remembering several from my own life. Dreams where I woke up convinced they had actually happened, with knowledge I couldn't have possessed. Exactly. Your species calls these lucid dreams, prophetic dreams, visitation dreams. But they're all variations of the same phenomenon, consciousness accessing information beyond individual awareness. So some dreams are just brain activity, but others are actual experiences in another dimension. Not another dimension. Same dimension, different perceptual layer. Reality has depth. Your waking consciousness operates on one layer, the physical, material, sensory level. But during sleep, you access deeper layers where information flows more freely, where consciousness can move without physical limitation. I thought about all the dreams I'd dismissed as meaningless neural noise. How many of my dreams were actually these deeper experiences? More than you think. But without training, without understanding, you can't distinguish processing dreams from experimental dreams. They blur together. And when you wake, your rational mind dismisses all of it as just dreams, losing valuable information in the process. Teach me, I said suddenly. Teach me how to stop fighting it. How to sleep properly. How to access these deeper levels consciously. The being was silent for a long moment, its vast presence seeming to consider. This knowledge was once common. Mystics, shamans, prophets all knew these techniques. But your modern society has lost them. If I teach you, you'll be operating outside your cultural conditioning. That creates challenges. I don't care. I need to understand this. Why? Truth often creates more problems than solutions. I thought about the 40 nights of exhaustion, of feeling like something essential was missing from my life without knowing what. Because living in ignorance is worse. I'd rather understand and struggle than remain comfortable and disconnected. The being made that sound again. The one that might have been a chuckle. Very well. First lesson. Understanding the boundary. The translucent bedroom around us suddenly became more solid, more defined. I could feel my body, both my sleeping physical form and this aware consciousness standing beside the being. You exist in two states simultaneously. Physical body in bed, experiencing sleep. Consciousness in expanded state, experiencing this training. Most humans can't maintain this dual awareness. It's why they can't remember dreams clearly, they're not aware they're experiencing them. Like lucid dreaming. Similar but deeper. Lucid dreaming is becoming aware you're dreaming while remaining in dream state. This is maintaining awareness across both states, fully experiencing sleep while simultaneously remaining conscious. Very few humans can do this naturally. How do I develop it? Practice. Every night, as you fall asleep, hold your awareness at the threshold. Don't fight the expansion, but don't fully release into it either. Stay balanced on the edge. Like standing in a doorway, 1 foot in each room. The being gestured, and suddenly I felt it. The precise sensation of that threshold state. Not awake, not asleep, but perfectly balanced between them. My body relaxed, ready for rest, while my mind remained alert and aware. This is the state mystics call hypnagogia. Your scientists dismiss it as a transition phase, but it's actually the doorway to expanded consciousness. Master this threshold, and you can navigate sleep deliberately. How long does it take to master? For your species? Months of practice. But you've been accidentally touching this state for 40 nights, fighting it. Now you'll work with it instead. Should be faster. Over what felt like hours, though time worked strangely in this space, the being walked me through the specific fear patterns that had been blocking my connection. Your primary fear is loss of control, it explained, showing me energy patterns in my consciousness that contracted whenever expansion began. Your analytical mind believes that maintaining rigid boundaries equals survival. Dissolution equals death. But this is illusion. I watched as it highlighted specific thought patterns. What if I don't wake up? What if I lose myself? What if I can't get back? These fears create resistance. Resistance creates friction. Friction creates the exhaustion you've been experiencing. You're fighting the most natural process in existence. How do I release the fear? By understanding what you really are. You are not this limited, individual consciousness. That's just a temporary focus, like a character in a play. When you sleep, you're not losing yourself. You're remembering your true nature. The actor steps off stage, back into unlimited awareness. The being showed me something profound then. It revealed my consciousness across multiple layers simultaneously. In one layer, I was Daniel Cross, data analyst, limited awareness, specific identity. But in deeper layers, I was part of vast networks of consciousness, connected to millions of other beings, accessing information pools that spanned millennia. This is always true, the being said. You're always this vast, connected, unlimited awareness. But during waking hours, you focus down into limited perspective. During sleep, you expand back out. Neither state is more real than the other. They're just different focal lengths. Something in me relaxed at a fundamental level. If I wasn't losing myself during sleep but expanding into my true nature, what was there to fear? Exactly, the being responded to my unspoken realization. Fear comes from misunderstanding. Correct understanding dissolves fear. And without fear, connection happens naturally. Now I'll teach you practical techniques your species can actually use, the being said, and the environment shifted again. We were back in my bedroom, but I was now lying in my bed, observing from that dual awareness state. Technique 1. Progressive release. As you lie down to sleep, consciously relax each part of your body while maintaining awareness. Not forcing sleep, but allowing it. Big difference. I watched myself in bed beginning this process. Starting with feet, consciously releasing tension, feeling the relaxation spread up through legs, torso, arms, neck, face. But crucially, even as my body relaxed, awareness remained clear. Most people either stay tense or completely check out. You're learning the middle path, relaxed body, aware mind. This is the foundation. Technique 2. Breath bridge. Your breath is the connector between conscious and unconscious, physical and non-physical. As you settle into sleep, breathe slowly, deeply, maintaining attention on each breath. Count them if it helps. This keeps awareness active during the transition. I felt the technique from the inside. Breathing slowly, counting, feeling each inhale and exhale. And in that rhythm, I could sense the doorway opening, the threshold becoming accessible. Technique 3. Intention setting. Before sleep, hold a clear intention of what you want to experience or understand during the sleep state. Not forcing, not demanding, just setting direction. Consciousness follows intention. The being showed me variations, intending to remember dreams clearly, intending to access specific information, intending to have restorative rest. Each intention created a subtle directional flow in consciousness. Technique 4. Reality checks during the day. Regularly ask yourself, am I dreaming? Throughout waking hours. Check details, text changes when you reread it in dreams. Light switches don't work properly, time is fluid. Train yourself to question reality constantly. Won't that make me paranoid? Or it will wake you up. Most humans sleepwalk through waking life, then wonder why they can't maintain awareness during sleep. Consciousness is a muscle. Exercise it constantly, not just at bedtime. Technique 5. Dream journaling. The moment you wake, before moving, record everything you remember. The act of recording strengthens the bridge between sleeping and waking consciousness. Over time, dream recall improves dramatically. I watched as the being demonstrated each technique, showing me the energy patterns in consciousness as they were applied. It was like seeing the instruction manual for a function I'd been using wrong my entire life. But understand, the being said, its tone becoming more serious, this knowledge has consequences. Once you learn to navigate sleep consciously, you can't unknow it. You'll become aware of things others aren't. You'll experience realities others dismiss as impossible. This creates isolation. I don't care. You say that now. But when you try to explain these experiences to others, when they look at you like you're crazy, when you realize how profoundly alone this awareness makes you, then you'll understand the price. Why do you care? You're just observing, studying us. The being was quiet for a moment. We observe because we were once where you are. Our species went through this transition millions of your years ago. We remember the loneliness of awakening. And despite our detachment, we feel something your language might call compassion. What happened to your species? We learned to navigate multiple states of consciousness simultaneously. What you experience as solid reality, we experience as one layer among many. We exist primarily in expanded states now, manifesting localized awareness only when needed. But we remember the fear, the struggle, the isolation of the transition phase. And you're helping humans through it. We're observing primarily. But occasionally, when an individual reaches a certain threshold of readiness, we provide gentle guidance. You reached that threshold. Most don't. What makes someone ready? Desperation combined with openness. You were desperate enough to stay awake for 3 days, desperate enough to stop dismissing your experiences. But you were also open enough to perceive me when most would have maintained denial. That combination is rare. It's time, the being said. Time to apply what you've learned. Return to your body, return to sleep, but this time without resistance. Trust the process. Fear flared up immediately. What if I can't? What if I forget everything you taught me? You won't forget. This training happened at a level deeper than memory. Your consciousness has been reconfigured. The techniques will be available when needed. Trust. The translucent bedroom began to fade. I felt myself being drawn back toward my sleeping body. But this time, instead of snapping back with jarring force, it was gentle, gradual, like slowly lowering into warm water. Remember, the being's voice echoed as the space dissolved. Expansion is not loss. It's return. Return to what you really are. And then I was back in my body, lying in my bed, eyes closed. I could feel the familiar panic starting to rise as sleep approached. The old fear of dissolution, of losing control. But I applied the first technique. Progressive release. Starting with my feet, consciously relaxing, allowing, not forcing. The tension that had gripped me for 40 nights began to melt. Then the breath bridge. Slow, deep breaths. Counting. 1, 2, 3. Each breath carrying me deeper into relaxation while maintaining awareness. The threshold was approaching, that edge between waking and sleeping. And for the first time in 40 nights, I didn't fight it. I let go. My consciousness expanded, just as the being had shown me. Boundaries dissolving, awareness spreading out beyond the confines of my body, my bedroom, my limited identity. But this time, instead of terror, I felt recognition. Like coming home after a long journey. Information flooded in. Not in words or images, but direct knowing. Understanding that bypassed language. I saw my life from a broader perspective, patterns I'd been too close to recognize. I felt connections to other consciousnesses, sleeping humans across the city, the country, the world, all expanded into this shared space. And I felt the substrate itself, that fundamental layer of pure consciousness from which everything emerges. Not as a separate thing I was connecting to, but as what I actually was. Had always been. Would always be. The Daniel Cross identity, the limited awareness, the individual story, all of it was real, but it was also temporary. A brief focal point in infinite consciousness. And recognizing that brought not loss, but profound liberation. I slept. Really slept. For the first time in 40 nights, in my entire life perhaps, I slept without resistance, without fear, without fighting. My consciousness expanded into the substrate, merged with it, and drew from it the restoration my system desperately needed. And when I woke 8 hours later, I understood what rest actually was. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window. I opened my eyes slowly, expecting the familiar exhaustion, the crushing weight of another night of failed sleep. But it wasn't there. My body felt light, energized. My mind was clear, sharp, focused. Not the artificial alertness of caffeine, but genuine vitality. I sat up, and for the first time in 40 nights, my back didn't ache. My head didn't pound. My eyes didn't feel like sandpaper. I felt whole. The being was gone. I could sense its absence, though I somehow knew it would still be observing, studying, recording. But the teaching was complete. The rest was up to me. I got out of bed and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Same face, same body, but something in my eyes had changed. A depth that hadn't been there before. An awareness that couldn't be hidden. I remembered everything. Not in the vague, fragmentary way of dreams, but with crystal clarity. The training, the techniques, the revelations about consciousness and sleep. It had all happened, and it had all been real. But more than that, I remembered the experience of expansion. Of being more than Daniel Cross, more than this limited individual awareness. And that memory changed everything. Over the following weeks, I practiced the techniques nightly. Some nights were easier than others. My old fear patterns occasionally resurged, trying to snap me back into resistance. But each time, I recognized them, applied the techniques, and moved through them. My sleep transformed completely. Instead of unconscious oblivion, it became active exploration. I learned to maintain awareness during dreams, recognizing them as dreams while experiencing them. I learned to set intentions and watch them manifest in the sleep state. Questions answered, problems solved, information accessed that I couldn't have known through normal channels. My dream recall became extraordinary. I'd wake with detailed memories of entire dream sequences, complete with insights and understanding that proved valuable during waking hours. Solutions to work problems appeared in dreams. Creative ideas emerged from the sleep state fully formed. But more significantly, I began to access what the being had called experimental dreams, those deeper encounters where consciousness travels beyond individual awareness. I met other dreamers, other humans whose consciousness had expanded into the substrate during sleep. We'd have conversations, share information, sometimes without even knowing each other's waking identities. I began to understand the vast network of sleeping consciousness that exists every night, invisible to most, but vibrantly real. And occasionally, I'd encounter the being again, along with others of its kind. They observed, recorded, sometimes communicated. Always studying this transition humanity was undergoing, this collective awakening to broader consciousness. But the being had been right about the consequences. I tried to explain my experiences to friends. You ever have dreams where you're totally conscious, where you can actually travel around and meet other people who are also dreaming? I'd ask casually. They'd look at me with confusion or mild concern. You mean lucid dreams? Yeah, I've had a couple. Usually just realize I'm dreaming and then wake up. No, I mean maintaining awareness through entire sleep cycles. Consciously accessing information, having experiences that are as real as waking life. The confusion would deepen. That sounds intense. Maybe you should get more sleep. They didn't understand. How could they? They'd never questioned the nature of sleep, never examined what happens during those 8 hours. They assumed unconsciousness was normal, natural, unavoidable. And explaining about the being, about the substrate, about consciousness expansion, that was completely off the table. I learned quickly that sharing the full truth marked you as crazy, delusional, in need of psychiatric help. So I stopped trying to explain. I practiced the techniques alone, explored the sleep states alone, expanded my awareness alone. The loneliness the being had warned about became real. But the transformation wasn't limited to sleep. The awareness I was developing, the understanding of consciousness as something that exists in layers, began affecting my waking hours. I noticed patterns others didn't see. I'd walk through crowds and sense the emotional states of people around me, not through body language but through direct perception. I'd know things about situations without being told, information arriving not through logic but through intuition. My work became easier even as it became less satisfying. I could solve data problems almost instantly, patterns jumping out at me that would have taken hours to analyze before. But the meaninglessness of it all became oppressive. What did any of this corporate data analysis matter in the context of infinite consciousness? I began changing my life. Small shifts at first, meditation practice, time in nature, less time on social media and screens. But gradually, larger changes. I reduced my work hours, accepted lower pay in exchange for more time to explore consciousness. My priorities had shifted completely. Money, status, career advancement. The things I'd spent 20 years pursuing, all revealed themselves as distractions from what actually mattered. The expansion and evolution of awareness. But making these changes while existing in a society that values the opposite created friction. Family members expressed concern. Daniel, are you okay? You're acting different. Maybe you should talk to someone. Friends drifted away, unable to relate to my new interests. You used to be fun, one said. Now all you want to talk about is consciousness and dreams and weird mystical stuff. The loneliness intensified. Until I found others. It started online. A forum dedicated to lucid dreaming, where I cautiously shared some of my experiences. Most responses were typical: skepticism, requests for proof, accusations of delusion. But then a private message: I know what you're experiencing. If you want to talk to others who understand, here's a link. It led to a private group, maybe 50 people worldwide, who had all gone through similar awakenings. Different circumstances, different encounters, not all had met beings like mine, but the same fundamental realization about the nature of consciousness and sleep. We compared notes, techniques, experiences, challenges. Finally, I wasn't alone in this knowledge. The isolation is the hardest part, one woman wrote. Knowing things that 99.9% of humanity doesn't know, can't know until they're ready. Feeling like an alien in human society. But we're not alone, another replied. There are thousands of us, maybe tens of thousands, scattered worldwide. All awakening. All learning to navigate consciousness deliberately. We're a quiet revolution. Through this group, I learned that what I'd experienced wasn't unique. Throughout history, mystics, shamans, prophets, monks, sages. They'd all discovered these same truths. Different languages, different cultural contexts, but the same core understanding. Sleep was the doorway. Consciousness was multidimensional. Individual awareness was temporary. The substrate was eternal. We were just rediscovering ancient knowledge that had been systematically suppressed, dismissed, forgotten. I'm sitting on my apartment balcony at sunset, watching the sky change colors. It's been 3 months since that first night I stopped fighting, since I learned to sleep properly. And everything has changed. My life looks simpler from the outside. I downshifted my career, work part-time now. I spend more time alone. I don't go to bars or parties. I don't watch much TV or follow social media. But my internal experience has become infinitely richer. Every night, I expand into the substrate. I explore consciousness in ways that would sound impossible to my previous self. I've accessed information that proved accurate during waking hours, information I couldn't have known through normal means. I've had conversations with other dreamers who later confirmed the same experiences independently. I've learned to blur the boundary between waking and sleeping consciousness. The skills developed during sleep practice, awareness, intention setting, emotional regulation, now apply during waking hours. My life has become more deliberate, less reactive, more aligned with deeper purpose. And the exhaustion that plagued me for those 40 nights? Gone completely. Because I'm not fighting anymore. I'm working with my true nature instead of against it. Through the online community, I've learned about the larger pattern. Humanity is going through a collective awakening, though most don't recognize it yet. More people reporting strange sleep experiences, lucid dreams increasing, encounters with beings like the one I met. It's a transition phase, one member explained. Our species is evolving from limited, individual consciousness to expanded, networked consciousness. Sleep is where it's happening first because that's when defenses are down. But eventually, it'll extend into waking hours. How long does a transition like this take? I asked. For a species? Generations. But for individuals, it can happen quickly once it starts. You went from complete unconsciousness to deliberate navigation in 3 months. That's lightning fast. What comes next? Integration. Learning to maintain expanded awareness during waking hours while still functioning in regular society. That's the real challenge, being awake in both worlds simultaneously. I'm working on that now. Some days are easier than others. Sometimes I can hold the expanded perspective, see through the illusions of separation and limitation. Other days I contract back into limited awareness, caught in mundane concerns. But the trajectory is clear. Once you wake up, you can't fully fall back asleep. The awareness keeps growing, expanding, integrating. And that brings me back to you, reading this now or watching this video. You have a choice to make. You can dismiss everything I've shared. Write it off as delusion, fantasy, mental illness. Go back to assuming sleep is just unconscious rest. Nothing more mysterious than turning off a light switch. That's comfortable, safe, socially acceptable. Or you can start paying attention to your own sleep. Notice how you feel when you wake up. Notice the quality of your dreams. Notice whether you're fighting the expansion process, resisting the dissolution of boundaries that happens every single night. These aren't complicated. They don't require special equipment or guru guidance. They just require attention, consistency, and willingness to question what you've been taught about consciousness and rest. But understand the consequences. If you do this, if you really commit to it, your sleep will change. Your dreams will change. Your understanding of yourself will change. And once that happens, you can't undo it. You'll see things others don't see. Know things you can't explain. Experience realities that have no place in consensus worldview. And that will separate you from people still operating in the old paradigm. Is it worth it? For me, absolutely. The loneliness is real, but so is the liberation. The isolation is challenging, but so is the expansion. I wouldn't go back to unconscious sleep, to limited awareness, to the comfortable prison of not knowing. But everyone has to make that choice for themselves. The sun has set now. Stars are appearing overhead. In a few hours, I'll go to bed, and I'll do what I do every night now. Expand into the substrate, merge with infinite consciousness, explore realities beyond physical limitation. And somewhere, I know the being is still observing, still studying, still recording this transition humanity is undergoing. Maybe it's watching you too, waiting to see if you'll wake up, if you'll stop fighting the expansion that happens every single night. For 40 nights, I resisted. For 40 nights, I suffered from the exhaustion of that resistance. Until finally, I surrendered. I stopped fighting what I am, what we all are, temporary focal points in infinite consciousness. Sleep isn't rest. It's return. Return to source, to substrate, to what you've always been beneath the temporary identity you wear during waking hours. The question is, will you continue to fight it? Or will you finally let go and discover what you really are? If you're ready to explore this further, if these words resonated with something deep inside you that recognizes truth when it hears it, then start tonight. Start paying attention to your sleep. Start questioning what happens during those 8 hours. And if you want to continue this conversation, if you want to hear more about consciousness, about the techniques, about what else is being revealed, leave a comment below. Tell me your own sleep experiences, your own encounters with expanded awareness. We're building a quiet community of the awakened. People who understand that reality has more layers than consensus worldview admits. People who navigate those layers deliberately. Maybe you're one of us. Maybe you've always known, on some level, that there's more to sleep than simple unconsciousness. Maybe that's why this story found you. Or maybe you need more evidence, more information. In that case, I'll be sharing more. More techniques, more experiences, more of what the being taught me about consciousness, reality, and the transition humanity is undergoing. Subscribe if you want to stay connected to this knowledge. Turn on notifications so you don't miss new revelations. Because this is just the beginning. The being watched me for 40 nights, but it's been observing humanity for millennia. And what it knows, what it can teach, goes far beyond sleep. But that's for another time. For now, tonight, just try one thing. As you fall asleep tonight, instead of fighting it, instead of collapsing into unconsciousness, try to hold awareness at the threshold. Feel the boundary dissolving. Notice the expansion beginning. And just for one moment, stop resisting it. See what happens. Trust the process. Expand.